Ahsoka Tano went from being one of the most hated characters in Star Wars history to becoming one of the most beloved, which should say a lot more about Star Wars fans if you ask me personally. Anyway, she's getting her own TV show releasing in August. What's beginning to feel like a swan song for Filoni to express his importance of both Ahsoka and Star Wars Rebels. I am interested to say the least. LEGO has definitely switched on to seeing just how popular Ahsoka became and is starting to release more and more sets featuring her as the lead ever since that controversial Rebels figure retired. So with the new show and new sets, I thought what better time than now to rank every Ahsoka based set. Rules: if you watch my Indiana Jones ranking, you'll know that I typically like to consider the sets that I personally own in the top roster. I won't be doing that today because the pool of sets is quite small and I own less than half of the sets that we're looking at, and you can probably take a guess at which ones I own. So I will just be counting every set that she's appeared in, except for the magnet and the collectible display set, which are both featured here in the I don't care section of this video. I also won't be counting any of those brand new Ahsoka sets because they've not released during this recording just yet. We have 11 sets to get into, so let's go. Number 11, The Twilight, 2008. I'll just come out and say it, the Twilight's ugly, the set sucks. I don't think that this is LEGO's fault in any way though, the source material itself is ugly, most of the stuff from Clone Wars is downright ugly to me. This is a giant grey square brick with no exclusive minifigures. Originally, I thought that this was a cheaper alternative to those figures, and I was going to write a whole piece on how it's likely that I feel this way only in retrospect, because I assumed that this was one of the first sets to feature Ahsoka and all of her other sets came after, and that is true. But then I learned that this set released alongside the ATTE, and it's more expensive than the ATTE. Who would buy this over the ATTE? The set that not only featured the main people from this, but also gave you more. This is the first of 4 Ahsoka figures that we'll be looking at. There's now 5 that will be in the world. She looks great actually. I don't think that the Clone Wars art style affects her nearly as much as some of the other figures that we like to make fun of now. I still really love that headdress piece, and the orange skin made for an instantly unique minifigure. She is the only variant of herself to include one lightsaber, and it was that ugly Cartoon Network grey hilt one. I'd really love it if LEGO remade this figure, because modern details would sell her look. We had an Anakin and an R2 added here as well, and Stinky, like I mentioned. I can confidently say that the Twilight is one set I'll never be looking for in the aftermarket. Number 10, Brickheads, 2022. This released just last year as a special 150th Brickheads set. LEGO also gave the community the opportunity in completing a fan vote on December 2020 to choose a theme to celebrate. Now, I'm still actually personally salty that Star Wars won over Jaws and Lilo and Stitch. Seriously? Collectively, we've decided to vote for an already existing license over something brand new. But we got one more Stitch CMF figure later on, and we are getting a Jaws set that has been announced. It's a day one purchase right there. So Ahsoka was chosen, and she was directly tied into her Clone Wars Season 7 outfit. It's nice. I buy the occasional Brickheads every now and then to support the license more than I just love Brickheads, but I do like that Ahsoka build. She ranks here and not higher because I don't think she should have been based on the most modern design. This was clearly chosen because it was just what was in at that point in time, and it has nothing to do with the actual representation of a celebration. This isn't worth celebrating to me. It should have been her first appearance, obviously, clearly. Number 9, Ahsoka Starfighter and Vulture Droid, 2009. Now this is a cheaper alternative to getting an Ahsoka figure. The set's pretty neat. It's just a little bit too close to some familiar territory for some people, I think. I like the idea of collecting all of the Starfighters, so I do see the value in that. The Vulture Droid is really cool as well. I feel nostalgic to the idea of the 2-in-1 sets, which funnily enough LEGO have released 2 sets that are very similar to this idea this year alone, so maybe they're in for a bit of a comeback. The Buzz Droid builds are really cool. I've never had a set with one of those before, and R7 is the only exclusive part here. I don't know how the community feels on this one. I think that this set really works if you don't have anything that's offered in this from somewhere else. Personally speaking, I have Ahsoka, and I have a Starfighter at the very least, so I'm okay. Number 8, Rebel Combat Frigate, 2016. It's a giant ship, and you should probably know that me personally, I don't care for the frigate type sets. I really like the Republic ones, but that's for nostalgic reasons. The ships are just way too big to be made into an appropriate size LEGO set for me that can be scalable with minifigures. Just doesn't work, doesn't do anything for me. I've almost considered buying the Snoke one and that Moff Gideon one, just so that I could have one and fully decide for myself, but they're also up to 300 NZD. I just can't do that, I can't justify that price. We'll talk about the positives. Looks nice, for what it is. 2 exclusive figures as well, pretty prominent characters in the show. Chopper and Ezra were released in other sets. I've always felt really iffy on that Ezra figure. I think the hair's a bad choice and the torso printing looks really cheap compared to other Rebels figures. I really just don't feel for this. But I also have a very big grudge on this set because this set single-handedly has caused nothing but problems for this community ever since it retired. The Ahsoka figure is valued at, as of now, 435 New Zealand dollars for a brand new condition. That is ridiculous. The set alone is valued at apparently $638. So you mean to tell me that this set is only an extra $200 from what the Ahsoka is valued at? She makes up more than half the price of the set. No, come off it. I hate this figure. I thought that the design was bad even from release. Why did LEGO decide that the best course of action here was to remove her eyes? She looks nothing like this in any material. This is 100% just creative liberties that have stuck around ever since, and I think she looks awful. Her headdress is a longer piece, which is a really great inclusion. It adds a nice variety to those other Ahsoka figures. And she also reuses the Asajj Ventress hilts, which was new for the figure at the time. A figure that I thought looked bad was single-handedly chosen to be the one to break the second-hand community. She's not worth it. $400, are you kidding me? Number 7, Anakin's Y-Wing 2009. Basically the same thoughts as the previously sets listed. The figures are a rehash, kinda. The set itself is a Y-Wing, which we have had before, but it's labelled at a cheaper price than say the Twilight, just missing Stinky. It was double the pieces of the Ahsoka Starfighter and it was $20 more, but here's why I have it higher than those sets. Because yes, there's been a handful of Y-Wing sets over the years, absolutely, but this is still currently the only time that we've ever had a new unique design for the Y-Wing. Every other Y-Wing set that we've got, including the sequel trilogy ones, were just recolors and rehashes of the traditional design from the original trilogy. I think that this set looks really great, and I love seeing that generational gaps between ship designs. If we ever got a remake of this or a new Y-Wing in a movie that shows a different design and that would be made into a set, then the set probably does drop down a little because I can no longer claim its uniqueness of being the individual Y-Wing design. But for now, she gets number 7. Yeah, apparently the R2-D2 figure is exclusive, and yeah, totally different prints. I didn't know about this. Number 6, Duel on Mandalore 2021. I loved the duel sets that LEGO were releasing at the time, but they killed it way too early. They made 3 and then they just quit before they could even start getting really good. The most obvious wasted potential I think I've ever seen from the Star Wars team. That Starkiller set was fine, good foundations for what could come later. The Mustafar set was great, but those figures being reused later on kinda soured the taste I think for a lot of people, and because this set here became the final one, it just kinda flubbed the ending. So age and retrospect have caused this set to drop in its rankings because I wish we just got more from this little sub-theme. And when you compare it to those others, it's a really brutal looking set. A chair, it's just a chair. We needed a bit more of the wall here, maybe we needed some ground, we could have had a different scene entirely, we just needed a lot more here than what we actually got. The throne is cool, but it's just a chair, and Maul was exclusive, sort of. He ended up being re-released in one of those magazine polybags, but that can hardly count, it's not even a worldwide thing. I waited for the set to go on sale because I wanted all 3 of those sets together in a display, and they look really nice, but this is easily the weakest one. Number 5, Armored Assault Tank, or AAT, 2020. This set gets a lot of hate from people, and on the surface, sure, I totally understand, but it also gets a lot of love, and I'm in the camp that finds the outrage that people have a bit more hilarious than I do necessary. I like the resize of the tank. The tank itself went through a few adjustments over the years, which is really weird actually. The scale difference was really drastic each time, but this gave us some amazing inclusions of the minifigures. Both of those battle droids can fit inside the tank. The Ahsoka Trooper was a much appreciated extra, though I don't like how long it's taken us to get more. This was also the first time that we were getting a remake of an Ahsoka that could act as a pretty good alternative to that Rebels one. It didn't really work, that Rebels one is still worth hundreds of dollars, but this is a nice figure. She reuses those eyes, and I hate it, I really do. It doesn't make sense to me why LEGO stopped with the Clone Wars art style and made the figures resemble live action a bit more, only to make Ahsoka feel like she can remain a cartoon. I have the same issue with Hera, by the way. Her headdress is interesting. It's a reuse from the Rebels one in which her leku reaches her hips. This headdress feels wrong for being included in here then. It's a little distracting for me, and I don't think I'm the only one. 2 sabers were included of the blue kind. This figure would be re-released in the Maul set, in case I didn't state that already. She's nice, but she can be better. So much better. Number 4, Coruscant Police Gunship 2014. 2 sets released that produced an Ahsoka figure based on her, at the time, final appearance in the Clone Wars series. I have been chasing this specific variant for years now. There was a time where I was so out of the loop in LEGO Star Wars that I didn't even know certain sets existed. I missed the announcement, the release, and the retirement date, and 2014 is one of those years. This set may not offer much, but it's very unique. We don't get police forces in Star Wars, technically. The Anakin is an exclusive figure apparently, as was the Red Shock Trooper using that beautiful helmet mold, but the star for me is Ahsoka. In retrospect, I can now say that I think this is my favorite version of the minifigure, and a figure that I do not have, so you know that I'm trying my best at finding her in the secondhand market. This is the last time that Ahsoka would look as though she still had a soul. Her expression is a lot better than the first Clone Wars figure, and she actually has pupils. She has 2 green lightsabers, which use that new shade of green. A really interesting set overall. Number 3, Umbaran MHC, Mobile Heavy Cannon, 2013. Alright, story time. In January of 2019, I travelled across areas of Asia and I had a grand old time doing it. While I was in Vietnam, I stumbled into a toy store that was popularised by second-hand items and typical things that you would find in like a Santa's workshop. There was nothing there that was branded, but they did have this set of all sets sitting on a shelf, all alone, no other LEGO sets around. I had no idea what that price conversion was. It was significantly more expensive than everything else in the store, but I had never seen this set in person before. I quickly grabbed the box and I suddenly felt something really weird on the floor. I looked down and there were a bunch of Lego pieces there, and I soon discovered that there was a hole in the corner of the box. It was a secondhand store. Clearly this had been donated, or maybe it had been sold to them. Who knew if I could even guarantee that all of the pieces were in there, or the figures themselves? There were parts on the floor, and there were even parts scattered amongst the shelves. Our transport was set to leave. We were staying somewhere so far away, I put it back on the shelf and I left it there. I already said I don't have this Ahsoka figure, so I am left with this everlasting thought of always wondering what exactly was inside that box. I really love this set. It is a very specific Clone Wars set. It's based directly on an episode. The more specific the Clone Wars set is, the more I'll like it. I don't remember if Ahsoka ever interacted with the Umbaran or the cannon or anything. I just think that it looks cool. The soldiers and the clone were exclusive to the set as well, and I do think that this is a better set than the police gunship. Number 2, Clone Turbo Tank 2010. 2010 was a pretty insane year for LEGO Star Wars sets, and this set gave us our first looks at figures that are still desirable to this day. I remember really wanting all of these clone vehicles and these builds, but I ended up getting sets from other themes instead, because the price for one of these clone type of sets alone could make up almost half a wave of another theme, so I'm glad that I chose that option in hindsight. This set is great. I do have variants of all of the figures that were included, so I'm no longer desiring this as much. Apparently these clone troopers are exclusive to the set, but how exclusive can a Clone Wars figure clone really be, you know what I mean? Ayla Secura and Cad Bane were obviously the biggest draws here. Both figures are still expensive today, and even though they've had remake variants, those are also still sought after. Ayla Secura is valued at around $50 and he's valued at $70, despite that figure actually being re-released. In fact, Ayla Secura's remake is actually more sought after than this one, if you could believe it. It's pretty neat. A really big clone vehicle is an ideal Star Wars set for everyone's personal collection. It just so happens that there is another clone vehicle that also includes Ahsoka that I think is better. Number 1, ATT Walker 2008. What can I say? It's one of my favorite sets. This was the biggest LEGO set that I had ever received as a kid. Christmas 2008 was a damn good year. The biggest debate that I had as a kid was going between this or the gunship. Both have their pros over one another, and even to this day, both sets had exclusives that remained. I was lucky enough to be able to get most of the figures across the way, but the gunship still holding the Asajj Ventress, this ATT still holding onto Rex. It's tough on a child having to make these kinds of decisions, so I didn't make the decision. My mum made it for me, because she was paying for it as a Christmas present, and she chose this one because it was cheaper. The ATT has seen its fair share of changes and upgrades over the years, and I fundamentally believe that the one from last year is a better set than this one overall, but I'll always hold this one near and dear to my heart. The new 2023 Ahsoka sets have blown me away with the builds and the figures that are involved. Prices are something that could be worked on, but when is that not the case? I look forward to seeing how I personally feel about the Ahsoka show, because that will determine whether or not I want to spend the 500 NZ on all of those sets or not. At the very least, it's nice to have more Ahsoka sets. If you enjoyed this ranking, or if you hated it, let me know in the comments down below. Liking and subscribing does help to support this channel. Ka kite anō, thank you very much.